Francois was for a very long time director of the computer science lab at Sony, an experimental research lab, doing some of definitely the world's most interesting work in generative music systems and real-time improvisation systems. And more recently, moved to Spotify, I think about 2 or 3 years ago, and heads up their creator technology lab there. All right, I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much for joining us from Paris, Francois.
Yes, thanks a lot for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to talk about the situation, let's say, about what AI can do for let's say creative domains. And because I don't have much time, I try to summarize my point, so to speak, which is in the title. So the question I'm asking is AI assisted creation, which is the use of AI, whatever the actual specific technologies, but the use of all these new technologies to help people make music, which is now referred to as AI assisted creation. Is the problem solved? And you know that when you have a title with a question, usually the answer is yes. So I will say, yes, the problem is solved. And I am spoiling the message here. The problem is solved, but there are new problems which have popped up because of the fact that we are now able to do all these generation and all these things. And the new problems are actually much harder. So this is basically my message. So now just a little bit more details. I've been working, maybe as Oli said, for some times on this, in this domain of trying to use AI to make music in many different ways. So I've designed a lot of systems, and the thing I'm most proud of probably are not the systems actually anymore, but the music which has been composed, created with these systems, in particular Flow Machine. I'm just mentioning very briefly Daddy's Car, which was a pastiche of the Beatles in, I think, 2016. And then with musician Skiger, he made, with the tools he made three albums, L World, which had some, success in 2018, then American folk songs, and very recently a new album called Melancholia, which is also using a lot of the tools that we have been developing, AI-assisted creation tools. I'm just mentioning this because it's recent, and it's really an incredible use of AI to make music. In that case, we could say pop, kind of new modern pop music. Okay, I will not talk about this record or this album or the technologies themselves. I want to go back to my point. So basically what happened is that in the last 10 years, a lot of stuff has been done in AI-assisted creation, not by us only, but by many other people. And also some albums have been out. I mentioned the one that we did, the 3 ones, but there are other ones I wrote in the slides, like Yacht, Taryn Southern, Holly Herndon, Cotton Modules, and probably some others I'm forgetting here. And an incredible number of research results and research papers I receive maybe every day, maybe 5-10 new papers about AI-assisted creation. So we are able to generate all sorts of stuff, a bass line, a drum track, a multi-track in audio, in MIDI. We are able now to solve an incredible number of musical problems, which are all part of the music creation process. Yet, I would say there is a problem because apart from the albums, which have to be listened to, which are, some of them are really interesting, there is no really tool out there in the industry that actually deliver on the promises that AI would help lots of people doing lots of music. Still, there is a kind of glass ceiling. So I wanted to propose a few ideas about why they're a problem. Why, although the technology seems to work very well, there is still no tool. I mean, there are stuff. I don't want to be completely negative here. There are a couple of tools, but they are really addressing very, very small niche problems. So there is no tool really out there to to really deliver on the promise that AI, could change music creation substantially. So I'm proposing 4 ideas, and I will go very, very fast. And Oli, you have to stop me if I'm too long. But basically, the first idea is that we have better models definitely now than we had 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, definitely. But do better models imply better music, or better musical artifacts? That's a question, and here the answer I think is no. And I just want to give an example. You just have to compare the Iliac Suite, which you can listen to on YouTube. It's 1956 with very elementary Markov chains and generate and test, to, for instance, Deep Bach, which was in 2016 with state-of-the-art recurrent networks. And both of these 2 systems actually address the same problem, trying to generate four-part, vocal stuff in the style of Baroque music, Bach, let's say. And obviously, the second one is doing a much better job than the first one. It's very obvious. It's not even necessary to do any test. It's so obvious. But yet, still, I mean, what is the one that you would like to listen a couple of times, right? And I let you, decide. But in my case, the second one is a great exercise, which is solved in a very nice way, but is not very interesting. So it does not really create a compelling experience that you want to reiterate. And the first one, strangely enough, is something you can still listen to today, and it has lots of surprises and interesting elements. So I'm just, it's not a proof here. I'm just launching this, because there are 60 years, separate, or 70 years separate these 2 things, and it's very interesting to ask, is better, what does better mean? I also want to echo here, what Douglas Eck, who's leading the Magenta team, said recently, in a conference, in a talk, in a keynote, saying, yeah, all these technologies are incredible, but still we have yet to bring these models successfully into creative practice. So there is a problem, definitely. And it's not because the models we have are not good enough. They are very good. But, and I will skip this. OpenAI's Jukebox, which is very well known, so they kind of say the same thing. It's very impressive technologically, but still, it doesn't really work as an industrial tool. So the first problem was, what does better mean? Not obvious. The second one is this idea that we are doing AI, and if we are doing AI, we are doing problem solving. But then if you do music, what is the problem? And obviously, the obvious answer would be, hey, we have lots of data for music, which is the popularity data. We know how popular are songs now. You can count the number of streams, for instance. It's quite easy to get. So obviously that would be really interesting data for any AI system. Let's try to learn what's popular. What's good, we don't know, but what's popular, and we have the data. But then there is a big problem that this data is chaotic, basically. So here I'm just quoting this paper by which dates from 2006 in Science. That this very interesting paper that shows very clearly that popularity data is chaotic. Basically, if you do twice the same experiment with different people, you get different results. And the hits. So if we could go back in time and relive everything we have lived for the last whatever years, we would have probably very different hits. So it really shows this very clearly, that you cannot rely on popularity data, and popularity and significance are completely different things. So we think we have a lot of data to learn about what's good in music, but actually we don't have that. We don't have data on significance. We have data on popularity. There are lots of other arguments. I'm just throwing this here now because it's interesting that there are very serious studies showing that the taste, what we like, is actually not really based on intrinsic qualities of songs, but on the age, 13, 14. So if you think about this, and it shows that the AI problem behind is very, very strange, because if in the end what we like is what we have listened to when we were 13 or 14, then there is no point in building any AI system, right? We just have to look at age. Of course, it's a bit caricatural here, but that's a very important fact. So the second thing is, what problem are we trying to solve really? We have evidence that the problem we think we are solving are actually very, very ill-defined. So the third point, and then only another one I stop, is the fact that we don't understand how people listen to music. And there is a very interesting thread of works now about what we call skip. That is the way that people, especially young people listening to music on smartphones, you know, they skip. They listen to a few seconds of a song and then they skip to another one. And then this data is very interesting. So Paul Lamer a few years ago had started to look at skip profiles. He had shown that the overall profile of skips is the same for all songs. But we have tried to go a little bit further, trying to analyze, let's say, the core skip profile for individual songs. And so basically what we've shown in this paper, and another one is that skip profiles are strangely, it's very, very strange that they are consistent. They are consistent in time and space. So basically you take a given song and you look at the skip profile, and then you look again 1 month later, and it's exactly the same, although probably the people who have listened to this are different. And you look at the skip profile in Europe and the skip profile of the same song in the States, and they're also exactly the same, which is really incredible. So it means that the way people skip at songs, it does not depend on time and space. It depends solely on the song. So we try to understand why people skip. We have shown also that we can predict the skip profile from the audio itself to a very high degree, to a very high extent, very precise extent. And also we're trying to understand why, you know, and basically the idea that people skip when something happens in the music. So if you want to create a song where no one skips, you just have to compose a song where nothing happens and you won't have any skip. Of course, you won't have any stream either, probably. So you have this kind of paradox that if you want to have a successful song, you have to actually have a lot of skip, very deep peaks, right? And so all this is actually very interesting, but very poorly understood yet. And I guess that if we don't understand how people listen to music, then there is no point trying to generate music that people will like, right? And so so I skip this on skip. I skip the skips, but then the last point, and I stop. And this is the most intriguing for us, that we have tried, like many others, to build tools and to put these tools in the hands of musicians with various degrees of success. And what appears to happen is a kind of IKEA effect. You know, this effect is that people tend to ascribe to give more values to objects that they have partially created. And this is an effect that has been studied by psychologists and also economists for a long time, for maybe 50 years. And so basically, what happens is that, you know, if you have an AI assisted creation tool that generates something that's really very, very sophisticated, very good in a sense, the problem is that if the user does not do anything, he will not think it's his thing. He will not think it's his song or his, you know, music, and so he will ascribe less value to it. And so the problem is that in the end, what we are trying to do is not really to try to generate the best possible music. As we saw, it doesn't mean much anyway, but it's trying to create an interaction at the end of which the user thinks that what he has created is his thing, and that's very hard, and we don't really know how to do this actually. And it actually, I would even push this to the point of saying, you know, that in the end, the quality of the music generated may be less important than the sense of appropriation that has been, you know, generated by the interaction. That's a very, very interesting point that we are studying currently, but that also could explain why it's not enough to have great algorithms. You know, you have also to understand what exactly trying to do. So that these are, these are my points. I mean, basically, the point I want to throw in here in this discussion is, I think the AI problem, the AI assisted creation problem is solved. and there are lots of variations of neural networks, transformers, whatever that can do the job, whatever the job is, generating job like bass, again, drums, violin arrangements, all melodies, harmonies. But still, we are not there yet, and I'm proposing that the reason why it's not working really well in terms of industrial tools is because of these problems. So the problems basically are that we don't understand much about how people listen to music and what they like. We don't understand. It's only the beginning, and thanks to the skip profile studies, maybe we will understand more. We don't understand anything about music creation, and I think appropriation, currently I'm thinking appropriation is more important than intrinsic quality, whatever it means. And so, and again, I think we are obsessed by having better models, but we don't think enough about what it means in terms of art, quality of artifacts. Better models that do not imply necessarily that we have better artifacts. So in the end, I would say, especially the IKEA effect, that we are focused on intrinsic quality, but maybe what is at stake nowadays, especially given the incredible amount of music which is being created every day, you know that every day on Spotify, there are as many new titles than there used to be every year in the UK 20 years ago. The UK was a reference for pop and rock. So every year you had a number of titles, and this is what you get every day now. So you have a huge amount of music, and so in the end, maybe we could shift to the notion of what is good or better music, to the notion of what is the enjoyment that has been created by the people who have made the music, and the enjoyment of listeners itself is something important, but I think we don't understand anything about it. So Oli, these are my points. I hope I was on time, maybe too short, I don't know.
No, but I wasn't going to interrupt because I was enjoying it so much, and we do have healthy amounts of time. So no, you weren't on time, but we especially because you joined us at 7:30 in the morning in France, we gave you extra time. So thanks so much to Francois, and now we're going to hand over to Kartini Ludwig and Caroline Pegram.
All right. My name is Kartini Ludwig. I am currently wrangling a title of director and founder of a new creative studio called Copy Sue. Before that, I was a producer, actually working in the arts. I had a bit of a stint in virtual reality, and then I had the good fortune to land myself at Google Creative Lab. I was going to do a shout out to T, but she's unfortunately left the building. But if you're watching online at another time, T, thank you, T. It was at Google Creative Lab, actually, that I had the opportunity to learn a little bit about machine learning tools. Firstly, in the context of writers and AI-assisted tools for writers, but then at a later date, we did a similar exploration in machine learning tools for musicians. And that's actually how I got to know Caroline.
Hi, my name is Caroline Pegram. I am a producer. I've been working in and around innovation and strategy in the creative sector for the last few years. I started life as a live sound engineer doing front of house for bands. I then spent 20 years or so working with Dr. Carl from the ABC, who some of you might know, working across a lot of media, online content. There's that word, content. Oops. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, I kind of married my two worlds of art and science and started working with a music company called Uncanny Valley. And basically, we were looking at different ways that we could use machine learning, artificial intelligence to create tools and assist artists in the music industry. I just wanted to make a quick link to University of New South Wales, given that we are here. When I started with Uncanny Valley, I started looking at who was around in the community in Australia working in AI music, and pretty much all roads led me to Oliver Bowen, who's you're responsible for today, which has 4 or 5 years later led me to have a visiting fellowship here with Ollie and his team, and in that role we share knowledge, we collaborate on R&D. Ollie and Brendan Wright, who's also at UNSW, he works in solar. They were part of our AI song contest winning team, and we are currently collaborating on some commercial projects with Olian Rodolfo, his PhD student, and working with the School of Cybernetics at ANU. And we're building quite a complex music project with them, which is using external data sources and human engagement. That's the source of a whole other talk. But for me also, and the work I've done with Uncanny Valley, one of the really crucial parts of all of our collaborations has been working with Kopi Su.
Kopi Su.
Kopi Su.
So kopi susu means actually coffee with milk in Indonesian. I get asked that quite often. But we're an interdisciplinary studio. I'm trying to define that for myself at the moment as a fairly new studio. We really gravitate towards projects that are good for people, good for the planet, good for artists. And, you know, these are the kind of services we offer in, you know, project support, service content production, creative ideation, prototyping, and lots of things around experience design and strategy. I thought I'd kick off actually today with something that I gravitated towards back when I was first exploring machine learning tools for musicians. It's this quote by Daphne Oram, who, if you're a musical person, might know she's something of the godmother of electronic music and a composer from the 1960s. And in this particular quote, I feel like you get a real sense that she's starting to identify you know, new roles, a new genre. She describes and alludes to this idea of it's a sort of modern magic, this process that she's exploring, and say, you know, we think there's something in it. Some musicians believe it may become an art form in its own right, which is, I think there is a lot of parallels in that from, you know, 60 odd years ago to the way that we're looking at generative music and AI now as well. And so, you know, while Daphne Oram here is like mixing up early EDM, you know, kind of got me thinking, you know, did typewriters replace writers? Did the camera obscura replace, you know, artists? You know, did the synthesizer replace musicians? I know that Caroline has an opinion on this. What do you think?
I do. And funnily enough, our colleague Rodolfo actually tweeted this yesterday as well. Mm-hmm. So this happened in 1982, where the Musicians Union in the UK were trying to ban synthesizers for fear of loss of jobs amongst the orchestra, which would have been a disaster because we would have had no Depeche Mode or perhaps no Daft Punk. Luckily, we already had Kraftwerk. And I guess while that kind of seems amusing, back then it was a really genuine perceived threat. And it's 40 years ago, really, when you think about it. And there's still the fear of emerging technology, and that fear is not just, you know, in general. It's in creative industries. It's everywhere, and people do, as T was talking about earlier, have a real sense that they're going to be replaced rather than assisted by machine learning. And whilst that's not entirely the case, and there will be different jobs and new roles to play, it does have an impact on, you know, how you design a whole system, and the way you talk about this stuff is, in my view, one of the really important things that we need to get a hold of here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, really. And in terms of,
oops, sorry.
We can jump right. No, okay. This is our first collaboration, machine learning tools for musicians. We've got a little clip we can show you in a minute. But, you know, I guess through this process, I really tried to champion putting artists at the forefront, right in the thick of the process of prototyping and ideation. You know, I try to lead by breaking down and demystifying technology. And I think it's really important to try and help the people you collaborate with grasp the core concepts, you know, like what is machine learning, what is a corpus. I mean, even today, I think we kicked off this entire session talking about corpus, but I've worked with artists in the past who, like, that was something we had to talk about. Yeah, through that, I don't know. What was your experience?
I also agree that if you're building, you know, these kinds of technology, using this kind of tech and working with musicians or artists, then include them in the conversation. Like, you need to sit down with people and have a chat about this stuff. As Kartini says, there's so much about it that they don't understand. There's so much about it that we don't understand. Like, you know, you get, if you subscribe to any of these kind of email groups, you know, on this topic, there's an onslaught every day of new stuff. So it's just trying to do the best that you can to explain things to people, do good research. I guess my other really big learning from this particular project was a lot of things, but one of them was particular around a technology called DDSP, which is an audio style transfer that we used on this project. Basically turn your voice into a violin or a bass line or something like this. And the upside of someone like myself who's not, or Kartini who are producers, but not actually coders, but are nerdy enough to be, and interested enough to understand this stuff is really important, because then it allows us to then have creative ideas as creative producers that then might become part of the tool that's being built or the idea that is being, you know, suggested here. So when we did, for example, the AI song contest, I remember calling both Google and Ollie and saying, we've got this crazy idea. What if we get all these animal sounds and we train them and, you know, make ourselves a koala synthesizer? And they were like, you're insane. I think actually Ollie was probably the one person that didn't say you're insane. He's like, yeah, that'll work. And then that became our koala synthesizer, which became a really big part of our storytelling, which really the media took a big hook on. And, you know, we went on to win. So be kind to producers who don't code is my message. Hey? Yeah, the koala, there were no koalas were harmed. I just like to point that out. We'll play you a bit of the...
Suggestion. To recreate the sound, that took me 40 years. That's a diss. Okay, shots fired.
Hey Google, relax with the sass about 40%.
Uncanny Valley has partnered with Google's Creative Lab to investigate how music and songwriting can be aided by technology at this time.
Demo Memo, basically you can sing into it and turn that audio file into different instruments.
Ad-lib, you can put lyrics into the app and it'll spit back possible avenues for you to travel. It'll put me somewhere to play.
I'm seeing a new generation of Australian artists using new tools with their own experiences and creating a unique voice.
If you can put this into a kid's hand that didn't see themselves as artists, that's where you're going to see the change in the game.
Yeah, I guess just echoing before what Caroline was saying as well is, I guess as producers, you know, we really know that the creative process is never, not really often linear. And producers, we thrive on trying to help people get from A to B and help projects get from A to B. And in machine learning tools for musicians, which is quite a mouthful actually, we explored a kind of that framework that I was talking about before, which is about prototyping, collaboration, and also thinking about accessibility. We went through this process also, we typically do go through this process of hosting different types of workshops where we explore the problem through this ideation and prototyping, but also I just wanted to acknowledge, because this is kind of simplified in that way, but we also know that, you know, it's interesting what Francois was saying before about, I guess, like what is the problem and defining the problem, because sometimes you just can be led by the technology and then figure out the problem later on, and that's actually okay too, but it is also important to kind of go through that collaborative process. So it's in these sessions that are really an opportunity to kind of refine the language you use around frontier tech. It's a dedicated space where you can approach language and concepts like, as I was saying before, you know, what is machine learning, what is a corpus, you know, or what are data points, and like what else is relevant in that space. And, you know, as I've actually learned recently, that, you know, things like data for musical artists, they could be utilizing their data actually for different types of revenue streams.
I was going to give a little anecdote actually from when we did that Google Creative Lab machine learning project. One of the early ideation sessions, we discussed doing a hip hop lyric generation tool because we had Briggs involved. We canned that project pretty quickly after one iteration, and that was because we were learning a lot. This is like 4 or 5 years ago. It was part of the suite of tools that Google were developing that T referenced the writer one earlier, and it was thanks to T that we did this project. So when we were doing this, we were learning about, you know, where was the data coming from, whose data was it, what is the data, you know, what is the output likely to be. And so I asked the group, I was like, so hip hop is traditionally, very male dominated, and so are we going to end up with the kind of really biased outputs or really unsavoury kind of result here? Because if you think Santa Claus says ho a lot, you should have heard these outputs. They were pretty full on. We were regretting the other day when we were talking about this talk how we didn't actually have any screen snapshots left. But the upside was, through lots of conversation, it led us to create better tools. We created the AdLibber and the ML tools, which I think is a tool that we're actually talking to Google about at the moment to see if we can bring that back to life, because it's something that I haven't really seen around much for artists, and it is a way of using some machine learning to sort of assist the process.
And then we might be already almost at time, but I guess just to wrap it all up, this is, I guess, if you are, or, someone who's looking to collaborate, or you're looking to kind of get a creative AI project off the ground, you could consider a framework that advocates for kind of these things. That these are some of the things that we're led by, and that is, as we've been talking about, accessibility in terms of human-centered design and language. That's your UI, your UX, the way that you talk about and communicate technology to your collaborators. In my experience, also, the people who we best encourage is a diversity of people, and that might be, your artists. It could be teachers and musicians, and not just engineers and developers. And then, of course, the prototyping phase. It's kind of the idea of the best way to test an idea is to put a thing in the user's hands and see what you can do with that collaboration. Having said that, actually, thanks to Ollie sending through that paper yesterday, there was one quote, though, that I kind of thought about that came out of that, was that the race to innovate and serve users with engaging content sometimes takes precedence over considerations of how the creative economy could flourish to affect individuals. So that is just to say that while we do want to prototype and make things quickly, we also need to be, have consideration for people, and there is also a time to slow down in that process, and that's when you have to kind of figure out what problem are we solving here.
I would agree, and I think that it's probably perhaps time that we stop talking about what tech is doing to us and take back some control and slow things down a bit, be more considered in our process, and that will, allow us to better steer the development and the direction that we're heading in with some of these things. Finally, I guess it's often people like Kartini and myself who will champion people's ideas and potentially see that there is something in them. And so if you do have an idea and you want to chat about anything like that to us, relevant to creative AI, then we're happy to talk to people later on afterwards.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Caroline and Kartini. Why don't we'll all come up in a moment. So Simon, come on up. I'd love to welcome Simon Cahill from Warner Music as the third speaker in this session, and I'll just hand straight over.
Hi everyone, Simon Cahill from Warner Music Australia. I am the Senior Vice President of Commercial Partnerships, Media and Audience. Big words, but what they mean in a day-to-day basis is I look after and oversee the connection between artists and platforms. And that means, when I started 20-something years ago, I was a sales rep and I started carrying the bag, and now I'm sort of effectively the head of sales for business. So what that means is I talk to Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Triller, Twitch, whatever other platform is every other day. We have someone who manages that relationship on this TikTok, which is probably the biggest one of the moment. And within my team, we also do things like research and analytics, owned and operated CRM. We also do brand partnerships, sync, e-commerce, all the parts of the business that touch revenue. My favourite part of the job, which has been fairly new to the business over the last couple of years, has been the introduction of Web3 and technology into the role. So the one hat that I don't share with anyone in the team is the business development side of the business. And this is my really fun and enjoyable side of it. And I get to work with Caroline, and we've tried to get a couple of projects off the ground, but haven't succeeded yet, but I have faith that we will somewhere in the AI space. But I've always been incredibly interested in it because I think it's so now a part of all the platforms that we use on a day-to-day basis. Artists traditionally have been slightly reticent to the conversation, taking their art and iterating on it. is not something they're terribly comfortable with. And this got me to start with my, is AI a friend or a foe for the business as a whole? And overall, I think we're moving into a space, and I think if I'm going to answer Francois, I'm going to answer this hopefully by the end of it. But what we're trying to do is, at our business now, is take all these new ways we do technology and look at those use cases in much the way that everyone before me has addressed, is the why. Why are we doing this? The biggest and most recent example is an artist called FN Mika, which was announced on the weekend, having signed to Universal Records, or Capitol Records, which is part of Universal Music. I joke, I reference everything through terms of TV, so this to me is the Skynet artist. You know, Ready Player One moment. What we're seeing now is this kind of adoption of blended worlds. He's an AI artist, but he's come from TikTok. He's got 10 million followers, but his personality traits and everything is compiled by millions of data points from gaming and music. The new song he released on the weekend is called Florida Water, and it's produced by Turbo, who's a producer that's worked with Travis Scott, Young Thug, and another producer called DJ Holiday, who's produced Gucci Mane. So some serious hip-hop credibility within those frames. But it's also a collaboration with a major hip-hop star, which is Gunna, and a Fortnite player called Clicks. So to me, from my data-centric brand world, I'm like, this is a match made in marketing heaven. It's got a gaming relevance, it's got a TikTok audience of 10 million, plus it has a big hip-hop star in Gunna. So it's done about 600,000 streams in the first week on Spotify, which is a okay start. For an artist that has 0 followers, it's actually quite a great start. We launch artists all the time with a lot less streams. But this is a really sort of interesting first step into what is the commercial side of AI, but it's all, as you can see, partnered along the way through. A little background on FN Mika. Technically speaking, he is voiced by a human, but everything else about him, from lyrics to chords and tempo underpinning his music, is all based on AI. The other part to this that I find really interesting is the way that Capitol Records have come out and said that you can actually use this song royalty-free on platforms like YouTube and Twitch. Now, when it comes to the gaming communities, there is and record labels have the rights that we sort of hold. We tend to not allow for music to appear in certain scenarios. So, you know, you'll see a lot of live streams on Twitch, but you won't be able to listen to the music back when you watch them back because they've been stripped off because of the rights related to it with the label. This is answering a question, is how can we have more music used in these spaces? And AI seems to be filling a bit of a gap. I saw this recently too when Fortnite launched their new world. As they launched and went to the downtime, they put up a live stream of music on YouTube and also on the game itself, and it was an AI-created royalty-free stream of music, and they were encouraging players that when they live stream on Twitch or when they put up their videos on demand later to use this royalty-free AI-created music, it was allowing music to live in a space which it hadn't been allowed to. So the why, or the question that seems to be getting answered here, is around this use case where perhaps the record labels are saying no to based on a set of rights. On the other side, we're seeing, and this is what I've heard a lot today, is talking about platforms and tools, and there's quite a few of them. And I really believe, you know, I'm going to touch on just a microcosm of what is available, and ones that are particularly specific to Warner Music, as we've done partnerships with them. This is all in the press. I'm not talking about anything that isn't out there already. But I think the why and where I see AI having value for labels is expanding into spaces that perhaps the recorded professional music doesn't actually suit the environment or doesn't sit. This can take the concept of user-generated to the next level, and something I've been very much a part of in the last 8 years at Warner Music was the rise of user-generated content. First it was on YouTube, where we saw our music being put behind cat videos and day in the life of, and influencers using our music in certain ways, and it actually gave us scale, which we've never had before. Before it was like, put our video, put it on MTV, put it on Video Hits, job done. Now all of a sudden we found we were getting major pieces of scale out of user-generated content. Music's having this other experience. It's a very personal experience. It's my experience attaching the music to it. It tells a completely different narrative to perhaps what the artist created in the first place, but it allows it to go somewhere else. So we saw this happen by YouTube. And then the next step was this sort of coming down to short form video and TikTok and Musical.ly. The iteration that has been a complete game changer for us. But it's been what we've seen coming for the last 5 or so years is the rise in user-generated content. The big lesson for us is that music personalisation is part of this. And it leads me to think that AI can play a role in perhaps what comes next. From a content leverage kind of point of view for us and scalability, if we are able to create, multiple pieces of AI that then can expand the output of content for us, this can generate far more revenue for artists, exposure for artists, lots of different things. And you may have seen, I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, TikTok launched a facility within the app that you can add AI visuals to your songs, to the lyrics. This is round 1 of AI accelerating the amount of content that's going to come. For us, this is a good thing. This is how we get scale. It's quite interesting. I've been playing around with a couple of artist stuff in the last day or so. Really interesting way that we can get that. And for us, this will help us get that scale that we used to get from TV and radio and things like that. We don't have anymore. Now we need to find scale in other places. So things like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram Reels, Snapchat. These are all the places where we're going forward in the future and building those audiences. And then there's other places where there's a couple of things I've seen where there's programs or processes that allow genre variations of songs. So take a song and make it Bollywood, take a song and make it country, take a song. And that again allows us for scale. And these are some of the challenges that the industry is up against at the moment, is scale. So, I really do see a use case where some of these platforms can come and help us. The most recent one that we've partnered with is Authentic Artists. They've built a music creation platform that powers metaverse native visual artists, digital collectibles, and interactive music experiences using cutting-edge deep learning, game engine, and blockchain technologies. It's a nice sell line. I don't actually know what it does yet, but we're looking forward to working with them closely. It's been done out of New York, but that deal will be really exciting to sort of start exploring. Another one is LifeScore, and it's an adaptive AI held at the fingertips of our artists that provide powerful opportunities to tailor and personalise experiences for fans. So back to the user-generated content piece, like how do we put things back in the hands of fans? And this is, to me, at a broader space where the industry has gone so fast in the last 2 years with back to the pandemic and the rise of TikTok, this is very much about a user-driven economy now. It's how do we put things in their hands and allow them to scale those pieces. The other part, you probably saw, we did a partnership with Endel, one of the first labels to do so. What I love about Endel is being able to put it in with multiple different sort of inputs, and whether it's using things like your Nest temperature at home, your Apple Watch, biometrics, all those things actually change and iterate on what those worlds could be as far as music goes. I'm a big fan of things like Calm and also Headspace and what they can do in those music forums and spaces, and personalising content. I believe there's a big use in AI for around sleep, mood, and those sort of adjoining spaces. Not necessarily competing with what artists do in their own way, but actually supporting it in a different use case. One of my favourite ones, I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, and the lens that presents you is quite interesting. One of the worlds they introduced me to is a world called Splash, which is on Roblox. So it's one game inside of Roblox. Roblox has 240 million monthly active users, mainly between the ages of 9 and 16. And there's this world in there called Splash, has 2 million monthly users, so just a drop in the bucket of total users. But it's an incredible world. It's built by Stephen Phillips, who's from Brisbane, who launched We Are Hunted and is obviously a leading luminary in this space. What I love about that game is you can DJ and be part of that community and play along with Kai, who's the main person there. And what was amazing was my son came out to me and said, "Dad, I made a song, here it is." And, for me, who was a former musician who spent years getting calluses on my fingers, trying to learn how to play chords, he was like, "Ta-da." And I was like, okay, cool. That is a proper house record. Good work. We can do EDM. This is a starting point. So, watching them do that, there is something was really fascinating to me. And I think broadly speaking, where we're going to go next, the metaverse itself is going to rely on this user-generated experience to meet the scale of it. And by metaverse, I'm not talking about the Facebook one, as mentioned earlier. I'm talking about whether it's Epic Games, Roblox, all these other places which are far more developed, I think, than Meta's version of it today. But, you know, when you look at your avatar on Fortnite and you do an emote, that's user-generated content. You know, we're seeing this, the need for this thing to scale at speed. We're going to have to work with AI to get that scale. So the why is starting to become this use and scale. I think it's really interesting. We're going to need the blended version of it. It isn't going to be all one or the other, but I think it'll be something that the human population has to have a hand in. And tools that actually help them do that will be far more interesting, and allow them to create as part of it, I think is really critical. So today we have regular tools. Tomorrow we've got AI-assisted tools, but then I think in the Oasis Ready Player One version of the world we're heading to, AI fully enabled, where we're embracing the technology and the content we have to populate that larger metaverse. And I believe that this is going to be a different use case for the scenarios. And I'll just leave you on this, which was, you know, again, when I was talking to my 9-year-old about creating songs, I bought him a bass guitar. I taught him Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes, to which he put that down. He opened up Google Labs Music Maker and made a song in 15 seconds and said, ta-da. And at that point, I was like, okay, maybe this is going to be a little different to what I was initially thinking it was going to be, passing on music to my son in a very different way. But either way, that sense of satisfaction on his face was there. I don't think that's the end of his music-making journey. I think this will be a much more collaborative and involved music-making journey than perhaps where we started and where I started. Thank you.
Thanks, Working. So that was 3 very interesting different perspectives, and I let everyone talk for healthy amounts of time. I thought that was, I hope that's welcome, because there was so much interesting material to look at there. I'd love to just pick up straight away on Francois's final point, because I thought there was obviously a very nice connection with Simon's vision of how things are changing and this need for user-generated content. So Francois's final point, I think I've got this right, was about, you know, this reference to the IKEA effect, the idea that as music consumers, we can get a lot out of being active in that process, and there's many great examples of that. I think everyone touched on that in various ways with the tools we're looking at. So I just wanted to pick up that point with either Francois or anyone, just to sort of elaborate on, in reflection to each other's talks, you know, where do we think that's going?
Francois, I love the IKEA reference. That was, I will borrow that in the future if you don't mind. I think that was really spot on.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, what I can maybe add, I like I'm sorry, I don't remember who showed this thing about the UK musicians union trying to ban synthesizers, because very often people, and I do it also, to make you know, talk about this when the digital synthesizers arrived in the beginning of the 80s with MIDI and the Yamaha DX7, and digital, you know, synthesis became very popular, and also the samplers. And indeed, there is a parallel, because when all these things came out, many people, there was a strong, you know, a negative reaction, and it's right to make you know, to talk about that when we talk about AI. But there is a big difference, though, between this new wave of synthesizers in the 80s and AI. The big difference is that when you have these new synthesizers, you can hear them, you know. When you hear a song, you say, hey, this is a DX7, or this is an emulator or 2, or, you know, you can. But the thing with the AI, that music generated with AI, I mean, most of it, and here I don't want to brag too much, because I think we do it a little bit differently, but most of this AI generated music, you can't see the difference, you can't hear any difference with human-made music most of the time. I mean, this is something I'm throwing at you guys. I'm sorry not to be with you physically, but the problem with AI is that you don't hear the AI. most of the time. And I think that's why the IKEA effect is so important, by the way. It's because since you generate stuff that basically no one, I mean, if you don't know how it has been done, you cannot really guess that AI was involved. And actually, most people don't care how the things was done anyway. But you don't hear the AI, and and that's something I'm really sorry about, because when I started to do this AI thing with music, I hoped, and I still hope, that it would change the music itself. I mean, that you would have new kinds of melodies, new kinds of harmonies, rhythms. So sound is a bit different, timbre. But the thing that timbre, the problem that we are used to have completely crazy kinds of timbre already for a very long time. So still there, you don't hear it. So I would say, you know, the IKEA effect is a byproduct of the fact that you don't hear the AI. I'm just throwing this and then I run away because you are going to kill me.
Say about that.
Look, I think when it comes to if you look at what is popular music in a larger scale, looking at the Spotify charts is what I do every morning. And how I start my day, you look at those top pieces, and I could not tell you which of those songs have AI in it. There's probably AI in some of the production processes that are used in studios, like as vocal harmonizing tools and things like that could have those processes in it. So there's probably microprocessors that take place in all of it. The video clips, when they're made, probably has a lot of facial software in there that is now starting to refine, those articles using AI. So is it more of a and let me throw this back at you, is it more of a contouring of the song than opposed to like a synth sound that's completely different? Is it more of a way that it actually contours process as opposed to being a synth noise?
Yep. Or is it the complexity of the type of music that you're making? Because I know Ollie and I judged the AI song contest again this year, and it felt like and we read the process documents at the same time, and it felt like some of the things that we were listening to that were more completely machine created were awful. Or were they really interesting in the way that Francois was just referencing, that they were like new and different sounds, but if you played them on Triple M, nobody would listen.
Lots of skipping, probably.
And there would be a lot of skipping.
On those,
probably
those tracks.
Very quickly.
Yeah, I think on that note, it's interesting to think about. I don't know. Maybe we're just not at that point yet. And to Francois's point of, we can continue to have like better models that can, in theory, produce more efficient outputs or assets. But I think the key of using AI in music at the moment is about how it can maybe get musicians or artists out of their own head, or get them to look at different directions in the way that they're producing music, and maybe especially in situations where they can take their entire existing catalogue and sort of shine a mirror back up against them and show them that there's other ways to explore their own music and do something different could be more a part of it than just the sound.
Yeah, I was just thinking in response to your question, Francois, that I can definitely remember points in the history of synthesizer sales and advertising where the whole point of the synthesizer was to sound exactly like natural instruments, and everyone went, nah, they don't really, but they sound cool, let's make something cool with them. So I think maybe we might see that with AI, but I mean, I think the point, the examples that Simon was discussing at the end, and also your point about the IKEA principle, we may not be able to hear the difference, but actually the new ways of working and the new ways of consuming and interacting maybe mean that it's more of a felt than a heard difference. Like, it's not going to necessarily result in different sounds, but different types of engagement.
Yeah, I also think that the music goes in cycles. It has trends, and producers become popular. If you think, I think about the Diplo effect, sort of from when it was Paper Planes with MIA from about 2008, I think that was, and sort of he had a big run on production where he had a snare and a hat sound that everybody used. It was the trap sound. And Skrillex and him worked quite closely together on the Where Are You Now record, and then Skrillex had that sound, that sort of pitched vocoded voice sound. And then everybody started using that as a style. And there's no reason that AI actually can't find those trends and then follow those trends and replicate those trends at speed. So what we might see is a replication tool, but where I wonder if that point of organic creation still needs to occur for it to actually take place. But there's no reason why AI can't do trends and follow that.
Would probably be a fairly good use, wouldn't it? It's good at
so.
finding patterns.
So.
Especially when you've got access to Spotify's data, I think.
Yeah. You have my dream, Francois. That's your data is my dream.
He's not joking.
Yeah.
For the when I talked about the skip profiles, I mean, we published a paper, I think +1, and we gave the data for that, for those songs, or at least some of the data. Yeah. But sorry, can I come back just 1 second on this discussion and go back to another question? Is I think that a few years ago, when people started to work on AI and music, there was a kind of dream again that, you know, that would change substantially. That would, I mean, that we could create new kinds of music, new melodies, new harmonies, whatever. So it's not the case. And is it because music has reached a point in the history of music where it has become impossible or very difficult to create something completely radically new? Maybe it's a case. In that case, it's a bit depressing because AI can only contribute marginally to music creation. Or is it because we still can't do it? I mean, for instance, I mean, didn't have the time. I wanted to play one of the songs from Hello World, which I think the melody was really very strange, but also okay. I mean, it would stay in the limit, in the boundaries of what we can appreciate and like, but very, very strange, very different from what a human would have composed. And that was the kind of stuff I was always dreaming to do, right? But now I have a question. Is it possible to actually revolutionize not music making, but music itself? At least mainstream music, of course. And I don't know. I don't know if it's possible.
No, yeah, I mean, I guess you see it happen occasionally, don't you? Like, you think of an artist like Lord, who, I know Justin and Charlton have talked about this a fair bit, who puts out a song that's in a completely different mode, and it takes off. So
we even think about genres, right? The last major genre that was invented was hip-hop, and that's 80s, right? EDM, dance music, is an iteration on house, iteration on disco, so it comes from those spaces, which is 70s. We haven't actually had a new genre of music. And I mean, you know, having played in bands all my life, you know, up until I worked at a record label, and then seeing the guitars disappear out of the mix. Like, we don't sign artists that have guitars in them, at least not traditionally, because some of the work it doesn't do well on Spotify. And that's some of the language, it doesn't stream well. And that's some of the things we hear. It's not why we sign, we still believe in artists, we sign them because they're music. But by nature, there is less and less of guitar bands being signed. So the nature of platforms will always iterate, and it'll evolve music. So what I think AI will do, it might be a lot more of a subtle journey. It feels like it's been a fairly subtle journey so far. I'm not expecting it to all of a sudden become a plug-and-play thing that changes the universe in a second. But maybe it has the ability to change it, but to Francois' question, maybe it's actually more of a much more subtle change to production techniques and tools and sounds, a bit like a Diplo or a Skrillex, who can use that tool to then make something that sounds something very different. And maybe that's where the new melodies and parts come in.
I think for as long as we are, if you're purely relying on AI and you're always relying on the data of our history, then it's going to be quite hard, I think, to define new genres, because you're always going to be training on the history of our data. So, yeah, I can understand why when we do go, I guess, down the route of like those outputs that you were explaining, Caroline, from the AI song contest, where there's things that are just bad, maybe that is still the space, like the experimental space that we need to kind of keep diving into, because actually if you ever listen to the Daphne Oram like early experiments, those are pretty whack. You know, like they're very bubbly and scientific sounding, and I just wonder if, in a way, it is that collaboration between a true artist and, you know, that kind of space that's a little bit bad right now to find those new genres.
It does feel like it's still fairly heavily in the collaborative human AI space. Like, for example, we did a project at Uncanny where we used Open Jukebox AI to recreate You're the Voice for Telstra. And we had zillions of these outputs, and they were really whack and really surprising, and we kept some of them in. And, you know, but then we got Briggs and Montaigne and Tucker Perry in to work with us, so we had the artists, and we played the things. So some of them we included actually as the AI outputs into the song, but the other ones we played them. So yeah, but the song's not full of it, and we had to pay homage to the original track and make it sound, you know. And the artists they were like, where's the chorus? Because I said, I feel like, where's the chorus? Like we can't make it too whack. And then when we got the artists involved, they were like, where's the chorus? We've got to have the chorus. It's You're the Voice. It's like, you know, it's like messing with the national anthem. Yeah, that's where we ended up with that song. And it turned out really great. Can't play it because it's Telstra.
I hope you will be able to one day.
One day.
I've heard it. It's
yeah.
really great. I'm very happy to open up to any questions from the audience if people want to think and put their hand up, and our roaming mics I think are still around. Over there in the back, Stuart.
Thank you. Hello. I'm glad you used the word Skynet because some of this is horrific. I do have a question, but I just sort of want to preface that question with a note, which is there's a lot of discourse around the drum machine, of course, when it was invented, that the purpose was to replicate drummers, and drummers became afraid, and then of course techno was created out of that. You know, there's a lot of discourse around the creation of tools like Cubase and so on, and then we invented genres like drum and bass and so on out of those tools. You know, so my question is it just that some of this consumer-facing interfaces and so on, it's just too early in the piece, and the new original piece that Francois is talking about, and actually that's the really exciting stuff, I think. Is it just that we're too early and it will come? And the second part of the question is there anyone therefore that you know who is in that space, who is actually creating, you know, AI generated work that feels quite radically new, or are we just not there yet?
Thanks. Anyone want to jump in on any of those questions? I was just going to mention, just as one example, DataBots is a group that's just doing very hacky, strange stuff with AI, and probably is a great example of just really doing that thing that interesting artists do of, you know, testing the boundaries, finding the glitch points, and all of that. And I think there are many others, and I think that comes back to the point about new types of music. Francois, I think that I know you think in terms of melody a lot, but there are production styles and long-term structures and subcultures, I think, that are emerging that use AI in different ways. Whether they need to use AI or whether the AI actually makes any significant difference to what happens musically, I'm not so sure, because I can still listen to a DataBots piece and it just sounds like a great piece of drum and bass glitch, and maybe DDSP is one example actually where you've got new types of synthesis.
I recommend people looking up that DataBots song from AI Song Contest this year, because what's it called?
Nuns in a Mosh Pit.
Nuns in a Mosh Pit, that's it. Yep, great track. Seriously.
Yep.
You might sign them.
Yeah, I could. You know, I'm not open to. Sorry, I am actually at the moment trying to sign somewhere in between an AI. So in a previous life, I was an A&R person. I signed songs to the label, developed artist.
I thought you were going to say in a previous life I was an AI.
A&R person. But I'm completely open, and we're actually having that conversation about signing someone who is a internet personality in a way that has, but it's not as AI as you want it to be. It's actually way more AR and augmented, I guess. From that sense, we'll find an artist. KDA is another example of an artist in that, an artist group in that space, who were, you know, created as fictional characters for League of Legends, you know. So I still think we're kind of in the space in between. I don't think AI for me is kind of like the Fairlight synthesizer or for the 808. It's not that. It seems to be something much more nuanced and kind of subtle and around the edges. But yeah, I don't see it kind of having that same effect that the 808 has had.
Maybe that's just a scale thing. It's like talking about what effect computers have had on music. It's too amorphous, but specific tools.
Yeah,
it's still early days.
Maybe the tool, it'll be a tool with a name that you go, oh, it's the Cubase, or it's the Ableton. The way that Ableton can do that pitch bend that everyone does and knocks off. That it'll be more like that's an Ableton sound. So it probably needs a. I feel like in some respects, I think we were talking about this when we caught up. Does AI need a bit of a rebadging? Does it need a Web3 kind of do-over with a new name, a bit of a logo, and then going back to T earlier, language. You know, is it a language thing? Is this a bit unsexy to say AI to musicians because that sounds like that movie AI, that feels like Skynet. It's not quite as, you know, cool or gentle as perhaps a rebadging could be.
I wanted to ask Simon, if he didn't mind, to tell us a story that he told me recently about a role that they created at Warner Music.
Yeah.
This has got to do with language and the fear of tech that artists have, and you know.
Yeah.
It's an interesting role. It's an artist coach.
Yeah, we went back a couple of years, and so when we sign artists to the label, we've always said in the last 8 years that I've been at Warner, we're like, social media is your bag. You worry about that. You do social. We're fine. You know, it's use your profile on Instagram, or those days it was Facebook and perhaps Twitter, to help sell your touring. And then recently what's happened, obviously, with this shift towards short-form video and the decline of traditional media, is that artists, and particularly, so we saw it massively through the pandemic, the only way artists could connect with audiences via social media. But what had happened is artists were terrible at social media. That they had this vision that when they create a piece of content, they go out with a view, I'm going to go and make a $25,000 video, it's going to be incredibly stylized, there's a plot, everything happens in that video, and that is my visual output. I'm completely scared to get on a platform, go live, and post. And, you know, we've all seen the Halsey conversation from the last couple of months. And right before that, we were internally going, and I've been such a big advocate of TikTok, going, we need to focus on short-form video for artists. And, you know, in the 80s, when MTV blew up, we didn't just say to every artist, hey, you go out and make your video for MTV, here's some cash, see you. We said, no, let's work on this together, let's get a style, a treatment, and all these things. And we've taken that approach to what we're going to do with short-form video. So we went and created this role, which is, as Caroline said, artist coach. So lovely girl on our team called Ash, she goes out and meets with artists. She sits down, talks to them about their short-form strategy on Reels, TikTok and Snap. And we go through what the process is going to be and how they're going to live in those spaces. And you'd be surprised, like talking about AI to artists, we're still talking about TikTok. I haven't got over that hurdle yet, because there's still so much learning to be done, and in some ways some rightful fear to overcome, always being living your online life. That's not for every artist, and we appreciate that. So we're now in the process of helping them, coaching them, and we're moving the budgets from videos over to short-form content. So rather than putting 15, 20 grand into your video, what we'll do is put that into short-form content that you can have out, that goes for 3 or 4 months, that has a narrative, that has storytelling, you know, and get away from the content word and get back to storytelling, which is what artists are exceptional at doing. And, you know, like I said earlier, you know, try and get back to stories.
And then you can move on to how their catalogue is data. He loves it when I talk about this.
I know. This is when we get together, we talk about data.
We've got one more question in the audience there.
Hi, I'm Stephen from Monash University. Thanks for the talk, everyone. I got a question for you, Simon. In your talk, you mentioned using AI to scale content. And when you said that, did you mean AI assisting humans to create content, or solely AI-generated content?
I think the rights around AI and using it is a whole complex space, which again, Carol and I love to spend time talking about. I think the way I was addressing it in that reference would be taking existing music, artist music, and scaling off that. I do see users being part of that in one way to kind of expand our catalogue. So it might be the Bollywood version of a song, and that might be a plug and play situation. That might be a machine that spits out outputs. but I also see it as a user-generated interaction.
I guess during your talk, it did feel, when you used the word content though, it wasn't just about the music. I mean, you did use a Fortnite example. So if we talk about content in that sense, like in this metaverse where we're generating, let's say, Fortnite dances, how do you envision AI being used there to scale it? What's it doing? Is it helping us come up with the content, or is it creating the content?
I think when you're talking about those environments, they'll always have boundaries. The boundaries of the content creation will be set. So you'll be, like the emote is a good example of that. You're taking a dance by an artist from a song, and then you're using that within your world there. It's trapped to some pretty sort of strong boundaries. I think if we said you could take a moment of a song and then you would somehow sing through it, you would create something additional to it. It would obviously need to do it inside of a game platform, some sort of a tool that would allow you to spin it up into that space. That has to be some sort of machine learning that's going to be able to do that. But again, it's pretty open. I didn't see emotes as a big money spinner for us until it is.
Hi folks, I'm Bortik from Canva. I'm sort of a researcher there. Anyway, quick question. If you look at UGC and like the history of UGC online, especially programmatic UGC, there have always been, there's a constant cycle, right, of when you look at programmatic content, eventually it becomes a cliche, right? So people recognize it as sort of like, this has been generated by a computer initially, like, part of the whole hype cycle thing. Do you see us getting the other side of that? Or is it always going to be, these things are going to be relatively short-lived, and then there's kind of a race to find like the next thing all the time?
I look at my 9-year-old who thinks that everything that I called as a child as a joke is a meme. He calls everything a meme. He goes, I heard this great meme today. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I think the nature of that it's that transferable comedic expression.
Right.
It seems to have changed names from joke to meme to fast-moving UGC content.
Yep.
We have an artist who has done 69 million streams on Spotify on a song called Night Ticks that he seeded through a community that became used in a bunch of memes. The #1 person on TikTok used it, and then that spun into a whole nother world. The relationship between memes and music and UGC content, I think, is constantly evolving. It is the predominant, I'd say, way of discovery right now.
Yeah.
In today. Like, it's undeniable. Biggest, in a meeting with TikTok this week, I said, I think TikTok is the biggest thing that's happened to discovery since radio. Like, it is that important into how things have changed. And it's not something that we're in control of. So at the moment, I don't know if we're going to get to the other side of it, but what's going to replace it? Super interesting. But at the moment, that is the biggest generation of content.
Like the Fleetwood Mac stuff would be a perfect example of this, where a couple of years ago there was the TikTok where the guy was, going down the road in his car and he was holding the drink and skateboard, that guy, yeah. There was some, long-winded story about how his car had broken down or whatever it was. And
that wasn't true. It's sure.
No, I actually never believed it. But
no, I actually saw an interview with him. It's not true.
Yeah.
It's a whole other story.
But yeah, there was a Fleetwood Mac song was chosen, goes off on TikTok. Fleetwood Mac sold more records than they have in, you'll probably know the figures, but a billion years. And then suddenly got this whole new generation of kids that have gone, Fleetwood Mac, great. Yeah, never heard of them.
And Kate Bush, right? So both Fleetwood Mac and Kate Bush are ours. So I'll tell you the Kate Bush story really quickly. Kate Bush, Monday night, the weekend after Stranger Things launches, my wife's sitting on the couch, looks over me and goes, Kate Bush is #1 in the UK. I went, Kate's one of ours. How come I've not picked this up? Pick up my phone, look at iTunes, it's like 1. Pick up the Spotify, look at the Spotify viral trending charts, like, holy smokes, what's going on? And it was obviously happening at the same time. We mobilised at 8 o'clock at night to start content on TikTok. We called our friends at TikTok first thing the next morning and we chased. And that then moved from, the streaming, the Netflix world into TikTok so fast. All we needed was do a couple of pushes and that thing took it through UGC from there. And then it's the version after version after version. That is still, I think it just dropped off the #1 spot on Spotify this week in Australia.
So if I might indulge you with a follow-up question then, because when I think of UGC, I think of, the active creation process, right? A really fine, detailed making thing. And I think that's what's your definition of UGC there then, in this context, right?
Yeah, my definition is literally anything that is created by someone that attaches our music to it.
Okay.
Never really thought about that definition before, but I think that's as close as I can jump to it at speed, because it's literally, like we went from macro influences to micro influences back to macro. You can have someone do a dance to a song, but it's never as powerful as someone attaching real meaning at small volume at scale. And that's what we saw with Kate.
Great, thank you.
I think we have a question from Rodolfo at the back.
I don't know what's going to happen with Spotify. That's probably one for Francois.
It's probably a question for Francois, but I don't know if you heard that. Did you hear the question, Francois?
Not very well. Not very well. Sorry.
Can I summarize it? I mean, were you asking about the age-old question of Spotify automating the music creation? Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if Francois is going to want to
answer it.
Play the role of representative on that front.
Yeah, I cannot, really answer this. I'm not interested in automatic music creation myself. Not myself. Not in the team. And there is an explicit, mission statement of Spotify, which is not only about distribution of music, but one of the other mission is to, I think, it's a quote, help 1 million artists live off their art, right? So it's part of the mission of Spotify is to help musicians, human musicians, not only make music, but make a living out of their music. And if you look at the figures, by the way, this is actually the number of artists who can live off their art is increasing actually a lot. It's still probably not enough because there are so many artists out there, but still it's increasing. So I think the mission is to help, human musicians make music and live from that. That's really the thing that's interesting. And the other thing I am interested personally in team also is to help, again, not only do this, but also investigate how AI can be used to create new kinds of music. Ideally, create new genres or new, but it's also to change music itself, and that's of course more challenging and more difficult. But definitely, it's not at all about automatic music creation. It's not the mission. It's not what we're trying to do. It's not what people want to do. So that's what I can say. I mean, for Spotify at least.
Thanks. I think it's fitting that our last question that we have time for would be from Ben, who's about to be performing in a few minutes.
Doing weird AI looping creative tool stuff down in the art school cafe thing. So, I mean, this is a question that I'm sure all of you have interesting perspectives on, and I kind of want to hear from all of you, but maybe Kartini, I'll ask you to start. You work with a lot of artists who aren't necessarily AI people, and you're kind of, as you say, translating and helping them get their head around the concepts so that they can apply them in their own creative practice. Like, is there anything that artists are really keen to do creatively that the tech is not there for yet? Like, are there certain things that come up time and time again where artists are like, yeah, and I want to do this, and you're just like, it's just not there yet?
It's not so much, I think it's more about, what I was alluding to before. It's not like I really want this to be able to, actually, having said that, this DDSP, I think that was actually quite transformative in that it was something that maybe they didn't know that they needed it until they understood that there was potentially a tool to be developed that has the power for artists who aren't necessarily classically trained, like potentially hip-hop artists like Briggs, who have the ability to be able to capture like a demo. The demo memo is the name of the prototype, in a way in which myself, actually, as an example as well, is like I'm a singer, but I'm not a classically trained musician, but I try to capture ideas by maybe singing into something and can translate that into an instrument that I don't know how to play is a huge benefit to me. And then I would go to that musician, or I can experiment with that, and I can hear that maybe that is a good sound in that context, and that might inspire more ideas, or how to collaborate with a guitarist or a flutist. what is it? Flautist. So yeah, I think it's more like including them in the conversation and then having that moment to show them what is possible as well is a huge part of it, because there's not necessarily, I think that's the thing, is people, maybe artists getting stuck in their ways in some ways, that until you show them the opportunities and potential and including them in the conversation is going to be the thing that will actually inspire them to be like, oh, I actually really want to do this. From our experience in that workshop, it was like, oh my God, now I know exactly what I want. Oh, I want you to, can we get this kind of bass guitar? Can we train it on this? You know, suddenly I know what data means in this context. So could I train this in the Writers Project? It's like, oh, could I train it on this kind of data set? What would that give me? And then, you know, you get a bit of a snowball effect from that. Yeah.
I'm just going to agree with that because, yeah, there was not much experience of any of the artists playing with any tech much at all at that point. So it was very much more being shocked by what it could actually do. I just have one question for Francois, actually. So Spotify's, one of Spotify's big kind of format points, if you like, is music recommendation. So I was thinking, now that we've got a human here from Spotify, what do you recommend? What should we be listening to on Spotify?
All right. I can only talk for myself. You know, recommendation is
good.
You're
the human I'm asking.
I have the big thing I've discovered this year where the first thing is the Punch Brothers. It's an incredible American group of 4 incredibly talented musicians doing something in between country, pop music. It's incredible. It's completely acoustic. And the other thing is this guy, Gabriel Kahan, I don't know how he pronounced this thing, and the liquor store song he made a few years ago. And so he made a new version in the, the apartment sessions where he has this huge orchestra crammed into a very small flat somewhere. And it's incredible. It's incredible. And it's very innovative, actually. I guess everything is handmade in there. I mean, everything was composed by hand, probably. But it's extremely innovative in the format, very long. It's never boring. In the association of sounds, in the way there is even a typewriter in there. I mean, there is all sorts of instruments. And it's very moving, and it's a perfect combination of sound, musical innovation with a meaning in there. The meaning is we never talk about that actually. The meaning. Hey, songs are supposed to have a meaning, by the way. Oh, detail. And so yeah, these are my 2 recommendations. I don't think they are very, very new. I mean, the Punch Brothers have been out there for a few years, and Gabriel Kahn as well. But these are the things I've really been listening a lot. But it's a good question. I mean, I think we should come back more often to why we like music, what's interesting in this, and why each of us have different tastes. That's also very, very crucial question, and probably we don't understand much there as well.
I'm going to recommend back to you, Francois, the Who, H-U, Mongolian band. If anyone hasn't heard them, they're a Mongolian metal band.
The other day. Yeah.
They're my favourite band in the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Thanks. They're not in the mainstream.
Oh, they are becoming quite mainstream, actually. Yeah.
Not like the other Who. All right. Thanks so much to all of our panelists and to everyone else earlier on today.